accident that took place was not intentional. I'm asking this honorable court, I pray that this honorable court, whatever sentence that you're going to give me, please.
The English poet and playwright William Congreve once said that hell has no fury like a woman scorned, and he could not have said it any better. But when a woman is left hopeless but to fight for the love of her husband, you cannot begin to imagine at what lengths she would go to get what she believes belongs to her. To some, she would rather have him dead than see the husband of her youth, her first love, in another woman's arms. Welcome back to Tavern Crime Chronicles. Here we explore mysterious, chilling, solved and unsolved cases, approaching them with empathy and extensive research. If you have the nerve for fascinating stories, this is your channel. So, grab a drink and hydrate while I take you through the disconcerting story of a woman torn beyond repair. Today's story takes us to Bugolobi, a residential suburb in the outskirts of Kampala City, Uganda's capital. In the early 90s, it was famously known for the Bugolobi flats that were apartments for the middle-income families by then, and now for its bars and restaurants that offer sizzling experience 24/7. It is a suburban neighborhood situated on Bugolobi Hill and houses some of the most valuable properties in the country, as many men have set up businesses in the contagious city's industrial area. But on the slopes of this most sought-after hill are residential luxurious homes with high fences and thick metallic gates. But like they say, the rich also cry. One of these beautiful mansions would witness a murder, unforeseen, as the madam of the house drove through its gates knocking down her husband. This is the story of Jacqueline Nsenga. Born in 1978, Jacqueline's mother was a concubine to Charles Gasionga, the former king of Ankole Kingdom, and a father to the late Prince John Barrier. Jacqueline had a good start in life growing up in the palace together with her two sisters Chantal Karungi and Ratarimba. They grew up with most of the king's children in Kariroko, an ancestral home for the royals. She had her early education and later went to Boyogorere Progressive Secondary School in 1994, where she would meet Jackie Ruvanga, the now wife to Andrew Rugasira, the proprietor of Africa Good Coffee. Jacqueline's old schoolmates describe her as having been a calm but proud girl who only associated with the children of the bourgeoisie, and together with her best friend, who was by then the school head prefect, enjoyed a pompous life staying in Sankara dormitory. Upon completion of her Uganda certificate of education, Jacqueline would later go to Nairobi to pursue a course in professional modeling. Jacqueline, now a professional model in Nairobi, would often grace different social events in the city, and it was not long before she crossed paths with one handsome man, Juvenile Nsenga, and like luck would have it, the two started dating. Jacqueline was only 17 years old by then in 1992, and Juvenile was 32 years old, but not even the age gap would stand between them, for they had fallen madly in love. The two had a whirlwind romance as they courted for just 1.5 years and were married in 1994 at Mbuya Catholic Church. But one would ask, who was Juvenile Nsenga Kananura? Nsenga was on February 14, 1965 in Butogota, Kihihi in western Uganda, to parents Donati and Phoebe Kananura. He attended school at Kishiro Primary School in his hometown, Mbarara Junior, Kisubi College, and Kigezi High School. While at Kigezi High School, he was hardworking in class and exhibited the skills of a future businessman as he took up many small business projects, as said by his friend Bob Cabanero, who confessed to have learned business tactics from him. Often described as honest and very loyal to his friends, Nsenga would over time grow himself into an accomplished businessman in Uganda's transport industry, with one of the biggest transport contracts with World Food Program. And when he met his missing rib Jacqueline, together they built one of the biggest business estates in the country. Well, we all know that there are two sides to every story. However, This is the Nsenga story as narrated by Jacqueline Nsenga. As any young couple full of life, the two enjoyed marital bliss and were blessed with 2 children, a daughter Jacqueline in the year 1996 and a son followed years after in 2001. For some reason unknown, she flew out of the country to the United States, where she birthed her son Jade, and came back to her husband in October the same year. She unfortunately started to notice some changes in him that made her worry. For a man who was her best friend and used to share everything with her, he became a little secretive. They were known to go out together a lot, for where there was Juvenile, Jacqueline was expected to be by his side. But this changed too. He started sneaking and going out alone, and when Jacqueline asked to accompany him, he often declined. Most wives of the financially abled men don't work outside the home, and it was the same for Jacqueline, for she stayed home to take care of the children, ensured the house was in order, and welcomed her husband back home. But when Juvenile, her husband, started to distance himself, loneliness engulfed her, for she wanted to experience the love and closeness they had enjoyed before. Like any wife determined to mend and keep her marriage flourishing, Jacqueline sought help from her in-laws. She confided in innocent Bisangwa, his elder brother and best man, who promised to talk to him. She would later speak to her father-in-law, Mr. Donato Kananura, who told her to relax and return home if her husband was providing food and taking care of the home. To them, it appeared that these challenges were normal in any marriage relationship, and Juvenile would eventually come to his senses. Unfortunately, as Jacqueline tried to play the good wife and patiently wait for the husband to change, he distanced himself even further, because what started as a hangout with friends twice a week slowly changed to 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and before she knew it, he was going out every night and sometimes coming back home in the early hours of the morning. In fact, one day he stayed out till the next day and had Jacqueline so worried that she called his relatives and friends only for him to show up past midday. It is for this reason that they stopped sharing a bed, because whenever Juvenile went out till late, they had agreed that he would sleep in the guest room. But this happened almost daily, so they definitely had stopped living like husband and wife. Jacqueline was now completely devastated, as her marriage of 19 years was slowly crumbling, and she felt hopeless. She ran to her sister-in-law, Innocent's wife, who asked her to pray about it, as nothing was bigger than our Heavenly Father. That was her turning point, and in 2005 she gave her life to Christ and started frequenting Watoto Church and fellowshipping with other brethren. But unfortunately for her, things kept getting worse. They say there is 2 sides to every story, so as much as Jacqueline complained about Juvenile's behavior, he more so did the same. He complained to his father about Jacqueline's behavior of going out till late in the night, as she often frequented her favorite hangouts at La Bonita and Kampala Casino. But whether she wanted to kill boredom or to give him a taste of his own medicine, it definitely drove them wider apart. Some say that the incident that happened earlier in 2001 could have been the beginning of her marriage challenges, for something in him sparked a fire that refused to go down because a dangerous seed had been sown. Early in the year 2001, Juvenile's cousin Loretta had asked if she could stay with them for a while, as her sister, with whom she had been living, was in the middle or relocating to Uganda from Canada and had not settled down. Because our home was always open to relatives, we welcomed her with open arms, not knowing that she was a leopard in sheep's clothing, she was heard saying. During the 1 year they stayed together, Loretta was disobedient and never listened to authority. She also dressed indecently, without consideration of who was in the house, but Jacqueline was yet to find out why. One day, she saw Loretta clad in a see-through blouse and skimpy skirt slowly go downstairs, where she knew Juvenile was seated, watching television. Unbeknownst to her, a cousin would be visiting, and when she asked Loretta why she was dressed in such a manner, she said that Juvenile allowed it, and Jacqueline's cousin slapped her. Loretta would change her attitude for the worse, and often gave Jacqueline a hard time in her own home, for she did not care. One day, she left her phone on the table, and like luck would have it, a message came through. Tempted, She opened the message and it read, "I don't hate you. I am just tired. I love you." It was from her husband, Juvenile. What she felt as the hairs on the back on her neck rose was more than she could describe, but when she spoke to her husband about the matter, he disrespectfully kept silent, but rather asked Loretta's sister to take her away from their home as his wife was no longer comfortable with her there anymore, and she left their home. To take you a little back to the early years of 2005, Jacqueline needed something to keep her busy and empower income-generating skills, and so Juvenile supported her in opening a tailoring shop, dealing in clothing, and in this she poured all her energy. But what is money if one is empty inside? Because at the end of the day, Jacqueline went back to the same home with a distant husband and maids to wait on her. One fateful day on January 10th, 2013, the day's events unfolded like any other in the Nsenga's affluent household at Plot Muzindalo Road, but before the day could end, one of them would be dead. Jacqueline woke up early in the morning to take her son to school as she usually did. Having a big home, they employed 3 house helps who included the babysitter, cook, and shamba boy, and as she walked towards her son who was already having breakfast at the dining table, she bumped into the shamba boy who asked to speak with her. He said that he had lost his sister and needed his salary so that he could go for burial. Jacqueline asked him to wait for Juvenile, the man of the house, as he was still asleep, but his payment would be cleared. Jacqueline took her son to school, had a lunch appointment with her cousin, and thereafter rushed to pick her son from school. Finding her husband having a late lunch at home, she told him about the shamba boy's request, and he gave her money, which she gave to the shamba boy. She and her husband had a lengthy conversation where she reminded him that it was his turn to visit their daughter at school, who was studying in Nairobi. Jacqueline would later excuse herself to leave, for she had 3 engagements that afternoon: a church fellowship, a business meeting, and a wedding meeting of which she was the treasurer. Time passed by so fast, and it was almost 9:00 p.m. when she concluded the last meeting that was being held at Nakumat. She slowly drove home, and around 9:20 p.m., she was at the gate that had for so many years kept their home safe. On most days when Jacqueline or her husband was out, they would call the shamba boy to alert him of their coming so that he can quickly open the gate. But on such a day when he was away for burial, she knew that it was either the babysitter or the cook that would have to open the door. When she reached the gate, she went out and rang the doorbell, but no one came to open it. She suspected that they had slept, and this time she rang it even louder, and almost immediately she saw movement close to the gate, and she dashed back to the car as she had left the door open. She put the left leg in, and as she reached for the door to close, the car jerked and started taking off so fast. She reached for the steering wheel and, in a panic, drove straight to the right side of the gate that had been opened. Within a blink of an eye, she heard a groan and knew that she had knocked someone, probably one of their staff. She did not expect her husband home, as she was used to his usual routine of going out without informing her where he was going. But when she saw the lights in the television room on, she knew that he was awake and at home, and her first instinct was to run there, calling for help. "Nsenga, Nsenga, Nsenga, help me," she called. Jacqueline was so terrified, but as the groaning got louder and hoarse, she came closer to see who it was that she had knocked, only to find her husband on the ground. She screamed even louder, and the 2 housemaids came to her aid, all shocked at the horror that had befallen them. A few neighbors who heard the cries for help would quickly join them and help put him in the back seat. They rushed him to the nearest Paragon hospital, and he was taken to the emergency room, where it was ascertained that he had suffered a fracture on both his leg and arm. Jacqueline was busy making calls to friends and relatives while crying hysterically, and as they slowly trickled in, so did Juvenile's life trickle out. The doctors had initially said that he was out of danger and the injuries would heal within a month's time, but as Juvenile painfully tried to ease himself, but failed even with the help of a catheter, they knew that he had internal injuries that needed to be checked immediately. Everything happened so fast. One minute, he was holding a conversation and looking promising, and the next he was gasping for breath. Jacqueline was scared as she called the nurses on duty, and he was quickly rushed to the ICU for oxygen. Nsenga was now on life support, and before Jacqueline could begin to process how quickly everything was happening, the nurse broke the bad news of her husband's demise. As time slowly ticked, Jacqueline's days were longer than usual, but it was just the beginning of an unfolding hell on earth for her. She received unwavering support from family and friends, with none blaming her for the death of her husband, but that quickly changed, because within just 2 weeks of his burial, she received a phone call from her brother residing in Kigali, asking her to take heed for Juvenile's brother, because out of drunkenness, he had promised to end her life and had a gun to do it. As she sought protection at Kareka police base, she would one day lay eyes on an advert in the Daily Monitor by her late husband's brother, Joseph Kenanura, seeking to take full administration of Juvenile's estate. It was time for a fight, and Jacqueline lawyered up, but before they could settle anything in court, Jacqueline was told by her in-laws that she had to drop the caveat on the property or be served with a murder charge for her late husband. She now knew they were after their property. A common scenario in Africa: when a woman loses her husband, the relatives start grabbing properties and leave their late brother's widow to the streets. Nsenga owned a multi-billion estate which was estimated around SHS 50 billion, and it comprised of a fleet of over 80 trucks, several houses, large acres of land, plus several cars like a BMW, Mazda, and a van. Jacqueline was not ready for a fight, and she asked them to at least have separate shares for her children. But they refused. They wanted it all to themselves. Jacqueline did not chicken out, and on July 15, 2013, she was arrested and remanded to Luzira prison. She was shocked that the relatives who had once supported and comforted her for the loss were now the same people throwing her to the dungeons. This would commence one of the longest and widely televised court cases in the country that saw Jacqueline Nsenga convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison, just a year after her arrest on April 23, 2014, for the murder of her husband and business tycoon, Juvenile Nsenga. But one thing for sure that drove the nail right into the coffin was Loretta's testimony, where she mentioned that one day Jacqueline was angry with her husband during a heated disagreement, that she mentioned how she was capable of doing more than they could imagine, and that she herself was scared at what lengths she was prepared to go. But like they say, be careful with your words when you are angry, because once they are said, they can be forgiven but not forgotten. And this here sums up our case for today. Tell me, what do you think about the case, by the way? Kindly share your thoughts in the comment section below. Jacqueline continued to plead innocent till the day she was sentenced, and she did not waver in apologizing for causing the accident that took the life of her husband. But I am just a storyteller, and you, an inquisitive murderino. But I will leave you, my viewers, to make your own judgment, for the he said, she said can only leave one wondering what really happened. Well, thank you for watching, and see you next time.